Basically, the world's in a weird state at the moment. A lot of people have just recently started remote working because of the COVID-19 situation. So in this webinar, I'm going to cover the key things to focus on when starting working from home or working remotely and how to accomplish them in ClickUp. I'll then open it up for questions. Switching to remote is a huge change, so my aim is to be as helpful as I can and hopefully make things easier for all of you as much as I can. Now, a few housekeeping things. This is being recorded, and that recording will be available publicly afterwards and also be emailed to you. I have Sophia on the call, who'll be moderating questions throughout and earmarking any that should be answered at the end. Please do use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen for questions. We'll be answering questions from there, not chat. If you've recently gone remote, so the main underlying change really is that communication that used to be face-to-face is now online. And that has a whole bunch of effects, but most of us have actually dealt with it in some way before. We've dealt with people we don't meet in person, whether it be clients, sometimes colleagues and teams in other countries, bosses, freelancers, or even just service providers. We're used to phone calls, video calls, messaging, emails, etc. What a lot of us are not used to is to doing management and organization over these methods. And that's what ClickUp is all about. So it's about making work organization and management easy and centralized so that everyone's on the same page, even if that's not at the same time or in the same place. Cool. So basic webinar structure for today is key things to focus on, how to accomplish them in ClickUp, and then we'll open up for questions. I do want to keep a significant question section open just so we can make sure we're matching what you guys really would like to hear about. Cool, and housekeeping points there. Okay, so in terms of what's changing, so communication is now online, and we're used to this, as I said, and we've already done some things before. What we're not used to is the work organization and management part. So, key issues are communication, obviously. Collaboration and staying aligned. So everyone's doing the same thing and not kind of splitting up into different types of work or kind of overlapping with each other's work. And that's both on a large scale, what to do, and individual tasks, not overlapping. Managing work when you can't see it being done, particularly for managers. Significantly greater need for self-direction, even when given directions. So when you're working from home, there's really no one looking over your shoulder. You kind of know what you're supposed to be doing, but it's up to you to figure out how to do it, when to do it, and ask for help if you need it, because no one's going to be able to see if you're struggling. And that includes getting a personal agenda and managing time and distractions. So just making sure that, how you're working from home, it's very different, particularly with distractions and other things going on. Prioritization and task selection, and then maintaining creativity and innovation throughout the company, and morale. Okay, so my suggestion is the things you focus on first are these 4 things. Establishing new communication methods and patterns throughout the company, making it easy for everyone to see what they need to do, alignment, creating norms that will keep everyone on the same page, managing progress and outcomes. And that's what I'm going to go through in this webinar today. Cool. And I'll particularly focus on next steps and things to focus on first. Okay, so if we jump into ClickUp, I've got my spaces here. I've made one today that we'll look at called remote work. So communication. In an office, you can walk over and talk to people, collaborate, work and tasks together. Working remotely, you can't do that. You can still communicate though, it's just online. And it happens either intentionally or not at all. So my first suggestion would be get comfortable with quick calls. Things like Skype, Slack, Zoom, Hangouts, there's lots of others that allow you to still talk to people and request it if you don't want to interrupt. However, for action-based communication, you want to all group together and in a place where it's going to be able to be found again. So that's what ClickUp is great at. So let's go into, let's say, our leadership list here. And we've got some major focuses. So perhaps the leadership team might be discussing this task. I'd really suggest that you use the comments in ClickUp. So these can be great for saying basically any sort of conversation around this task. I'm just trying to think of an example here. I think we should do this differently. And you can, of course, @mention people with an @ if you do want to highlight someone to bring it to their attention. And you can assign the task to them if it's an action item that they need to do or anyone needs to do. Yeah, so for individual tasks, I would suggest using the comments here. That way, anytime anyone comes back to this task, they'll be able to see all the conversation that went on. They'll have a history. It's easy to understand where this task is up to. Also, for these people, when they're tagged, when they get a notification and they come here to read that comment, they'll also be able to see all the other contextual information. Having it in context is much, much more helpful than just a kind of an email out of the blue where they need to figure out all the context themselves. For conversations that are at a higher level, what you can do is a chat view. So for example, perhaps we need to discuss our major focuses as a whole. So this whole list rather than an individual task, what we can do is create a chat page view and have a conversation here. Now, this is not specific to any task. This is simply a view on the whole list. So anything we talk about here is about this whole list. Now, we can also talk about things at a higher level. So for example, the whole leadership team needs to talk about their overall role. We can create a chat view at that level as well. And again, at the space level, you can do the same thing. So what I would suggest is making pattern or your kind of standard ways of doing things that allow you to keep all conversation in context. So at ClickUp, what that might look like is we use Slack quite a bit. It's still a really good messaging platform for kind of casual conversation, non-action type things. But any sort of communication about a task must be on that task. And that way it gets saved and we know where it is and things don't get lost. If you have a lot of questions about something to kind of learn, we generally suggest that you call. So people will, call each other up on Slack or Zoom and have a conversation. If that conversation results in action items or kind of key changes to the task, we recommend that it be put in the task so that anyone who is going to see it later or wasn't on that call will be able to keep up to date with where things are at. And it's also just really good for our memory. If we come back and think, what did we decide on that? I personally have a philosophy that if I don't write it down, it doesn't exist, because I just know that eventually I focus on so many different things, but I will forget if I don't write it down. So keeping record is a really great idea. Another cool idea, because people are far apart and that casual conversation is a bit more difficult, what I'd really suggest is having an ideas list. And this is a place where you can capture creativity and innovation from among your team and give people a place to put good ideas. So it's easy to share and they can be added, a place where everyone can kind of add ideas to. And I'd suggest really knowing and communicating how those ideas will be looked at and when. And of course, because each of these have comments, maybe one person suggests the idea, people can comment on it and kind of flesh it out and maybe take it in different directions. And you can end up with some really good collaboration and innovation that way. So that's a neat idea. Okay, next up, let's talk about clarity in assignments. So procrastination is one of the biggest issues anywhere in work, but it's especially important when working at home. So the cure to this is often just to get started on the next task. For me, at least, I find everything is easier once you have momentum. Therefore, it's really, really important to be clear on what to do next. So there's a couple of things involved in making that really simple. One of them is to make it easy to see what needs to be done next in terms of choosing what's important and what's going to have the most effect. So let's jump into one of these lists. So let's go our leadership one. Cool. So there's a couple of different ways of doing this. Now we have some inbuilt features such as start dates and due dates. So if you go into the plus button here, you can access those. So we have a start date here, due date we've already got, and we can reorder those. So you might be thinking about, maybe you've already got it planned out and you think, okay, this is what I need to start on. This is what due dates are coming up soon. Maybe you work on the ones that are most urgent. but you've also got priority there if you do want to just organize things with priorities. You can also use a rating system. So for example, we have numbers or an actual rating. So here we might say impact. How much value is this going to bring to the company? And I've already got one called that, so let's call it impact 2. And here you can simply rate things with stars in terms of the impact. Lastly, you have effort. So effort tends to be either hours worked, so you have time estimates, or you can do things like scrum points with a numbers custom field, or a drop down also works well. Drop downs, if they only have numbers in them, they'll be classified as a number field for processing. Okay, so here I've got time estimates, and so maybe we want to think about, okay, what's here we've got a low time estimate but a high impact. Here we've got a high time estimate and a low impact. So maybe we'd do this one first. So that's just kind of a way of putting in extra information to help it make it easy to see and organize. Once you've kind of got that in, or however you choose to do it, do be aware you can sort these columns. So if you do want to pull certain things to the top, and maybe if you're kind of sorting on the 5-star ones, you can then sort a second column amongst the hours. So if you did have 2 with 5 stars, you could then sort between just the 5-star ones on a second column. You can also filter. So for example, let's say we want to only have ones where the impact is greater than 3 stars. Once you've chosen what your tasks are, or particularly for the day, what I'd suggest is using some sort of system to organize them. So systems are things like Inbox. So Inbox will organize all the tasks that are assigned to you, and in the first tab, it'll put any that should be started. So it's either the start date has passed or the due date has passed. So either should be started or it's already overdue. Second one that a lot of people work from, particularly when collaborating, is notifications. So here you'll find where people have updated tasks, particularly any that you are watching. So on any task, you can assign yourself as a watcher, which means you'll get notifications about it. You'll be automatically assigned as a watcher if you created the task, or have been assigned to it, or have been mentioned on it. So, I mean, typically you'll use notifications in conjunction with another system, but if you are just a very kind of reactionary, request-based, or collaborative role, it might be that most of your tasks happen once someone else has done something. So we are waiting on someone else to get something done. Once they do it, then you can start, in which case you're good to go ahead with just working out of your notifications. I really like our notifications because they don't go away until you clear them manually. So you can leave things in here until you get it done. So that way you know you're not going to forget about it. Next one is the task tray. So any task, if you open it up, has this little button up the top, and you can minimize that to your task tray down here. So you can actually assemble kind of like a to-do list for the day just by saving a bunch of tasks down there and then simply work through them. Next up, you can make a filtered list. So perhaps you have a way of filtering to just see the tasks that matter to you. You can create a filter, sorting, etc., and just see them there and then work through them. Another way, which is quite cool, is to create what I call a list of task mentions. So you can do this particularly in doc view is quite good, and also I think we have to fix something, but then the dashboard text widgets. So I'll create a doc view here, and let's just call it today's tasks. So what you can do is simply say, okay, number 1, I'm going to do, and if you do 1 @ symbol is people, 2 @ symbol is linking to tasks. So we'll say, okay, well, actually, this is the first thing I'm going to do today, and then this one, and then actually we want to browse some tasks. I want to go into finance, accounts receivable. I need to look at Nike. Okay, and just assemble the various tasks that you have to do this way. The benefit of this is that because it's a document, a text document, it's in text format, you're in complete control of it. So you can, put some notes underneath this, do whatever you want in terms of organizing it. Cool. And my advice generally is, and this works for me, it may not work for everyone, but I think it's generally a good idea, is that when you choose your tasks for the day, I try to keep my list small. I find that less tasks means less overwhelm, which ends up resulting in more productivity. And if I do get them all done, then I'll just kind of grab some more tasks to get done today. And I'm a really big fan of only seeing the tasks that I'm doing today, rather than just kind of seeing the whole list. It just is more motivating for me for some reason. So anyway, if that works for you as well, that might be a good thing. All right, next up, let's talk alignment. So alignment's really important because when you're all in the same space, it's easy to kind of all be working on the same thing. You can see what each other is doing and just kind of match up. When you're all working from separate areas, you can't see what everyone else is doing. It's very easy to go on different tangents, either trying to get the work done in different ways so that it doesn't kind of mesh together, or to clash and overlap and end up wasting time kind of doing the same work as someone else. So really important for everyone to be aligned on what needs done, who is doing it, and how you're dividing up the work. So one thing that we do internally at ClickUp is we have goals every Monday morning. And we have a meeting about that so that everyone can see everyone else's goals. So if we go into the goals feature here, and then individual scorecards, what that will look like is each person will go through, and you typically have one for last week, one for this week. And you say, okay, this is what I got done last week. This is what I'm working on this week. And each person will step through their targets. So I think I've got one here, my one that's got a couple of targets. So, there might be a couple of the remote work webinar I'm working on today, and then a Formula View video. Typically you have a few more as well. That way everyone kind of has an understanding of what the lay of the land looks like in the big sense, and can even suggest help or work in with people once they know what's happening. So that can be a great thing to do. I'd also suggest having a single source of truth. So kind of one place where the tasks exist, and it can be multiple places, but I'd say avoid duplicating tasks. If you have two tasks for the same thing in different places, it's very easy for people to one person to work on one task, another person to work on a different task, and end up not realizing that they're working on the same task as someone else. In order to have single tasks and not duplicate, you may need to gather tasks from different areas into one view. And we can do that by using views. So here I've got a list view. This is just the basic required one. And by the way, this is new. This came out in our last update. We now organize all of our views in a nice little drop-down list. So I might want to pull in tasks from multiple spaces. Maybe I'd normally work in finance, but I've gone to the remote work space level so I can pull in tasks from other folders as well. And I'm going to filter to just see the tasks that I want to see. And I've actually set up a custom field called client. Actually, sorry, it's tags. No, sorry, it's a label field. I'm getting mixed up. Okay, here we go. So client is, and then we can choose one of our tags. So here I've just got to set up basic ones. And so I can pull together all of client 2's tasks from across all of my folders. And this can be done at any level. If I needed to pull across multiple spaces, I'd go to the everything level. So in generally, when you're setting up your hierarchy, I'll talk about this later, but it's good to, it doesn't really matter how you organize your hierarchy, as long as everyone understands it. And then if you need to pull together tasks in a way that doesn't fit your hierarchy, so you can't just look at one list or one folder, then use some sort of way of identifying them, either tags, a label field, or maybe something else, and then use a filter to pull them all together at a higher level. Okay, next up, tidiness. And I've said this is helpful, but not necessary, because I don't want you to stress out about it. It's not, you don't need to make your ClickUp look super tidy. But if it is tidy, it can really help everyone to understand where things are and kind of move through it quickly without getting confused. So I typically suggest having a system for low priority things in particular that probably aren't going to get done, and that's okay. Some things are good ideas, but we're just never going to get to them because there's so many more important ideas or higher priority ideas. So what I suggest is a backlog place. So what I've done here is actually created a separate backlog folder with a list in it for each of the other folders. Now you could just create, this within each folder, saying, that there's a backlog in leadership, a backlog in customer service, a backlog in finance, but I actually felt like making it separate this time. So if we do ever end up with stuff that's just kind of sitting there and cluttering the view, maybe it's just a account that's gone cold, and we just kind of see it every day, but it's really not helping us at all. What we can do is just drag it into the backlog, and it's still there. We can still look at it. I'm just going to change the names of the statuses here to match them up. So we can still see it whenever we want, but it's out of the way and it's keeping our view really clean. What can happen is you can end up with a whole bunch of just unimportant tasks that you're kind of looking over every day. It's taking a lot of mental energy to process through whether you need to do anything about them. So I think it's a really great idea to kind of move them out of the way and just look at them maybe once a week, once a month, depending on how unimportant they are, so that your day-to-day work and view is really, really clean. Cool. And going back to my point before, I would suggest that you lay out your ClickUp, your spaces, folders, and lists in a way that has some sort of system. It doesn't actually matter what system or whether it's good or bad. It doesn't really matter. Don't worry too much about that, particularly when starting off. What matters is that everyone understands it. If everyone gets it, then everyone will know where things go, and there won't be kind of time wasted and confusion and thinking about, does this task go in folder A or folder B? I'm not sure. You can kind of create a lot of unnecessary thought around that. So just make it a way that everyone gets, everyone is happy with, and then you're pretty good to go ahead. Okay, next up, watching. So make sure that you're watching tasks that matter. So in any task, you can access the watching feature up here, little eye icon, and you can select yourself, unselect yourself, select other people, and those are the people that will get notifications about that task. So if there are tasks that matter to you, I really suggest going through and making sure you're a watcher on each of them so that you will get notifications. And that way it's very easy to interact with updates and progress on those tasks because you'll be notified about it, and you can just kind of jump in, leave a comment if it's relevant to you, or just kind of watch it from afar as it progresses. I would suggest that you look at your notifications at least once a day, quite probably more often than that, just to keep up with what's happening on those tasks that matter, what your teammates are doing if you're needed anywhere, particularly if anyone has tagged you and asked a question. Okay. And then in relation to notifications and watching is your notification settings. So the easiest way to get to it is this little cog icon up here. And this will take you to, this is a whole list of different types of actions. For each action, you can choose to not be notified about it at all, or to be notified on one of your places. So email is going to obviously send you an email. If you have a mobile app, it can alert you there with or without sound. Web is the in-app notifications that we saw just up here. And then the last one is browser notifications. And they work a little bit differently depending on what operating system you have. But it'll basically send the information to your operating system, and generally it'll have like a little pop-up down the bottom right-hand corner. And you can kind of change settings on that. If you do want sound, you can normally turn that on through your operating system settings. So one thing I would suggest as soon as anyone starts a ClickUp account is to go through and adjust these. Oftentimes you want to turn a lot off just so that it's kind of simple, you don't get too many notifications in the beginning, and then to kind of turn on the ones that you think are going to be really high priority. Cool. Next up, processes. So you're probably going to create some processes, say, hey, team, this is kind of the best way of doing this. This is how we tend to go about it. One thing I would suggest is that ClickUp docs are really great for those. So ClickUp docs are basically a stack of pages where you've got a text editor. You can kind of write what you want and build out pages, essentially. And the really great thing is that it's right here in ClickUp, so people don't have to go anywhere. You can even favorite these, so it's in your favorites list, and quickly jump back to your SOPs or processes anytime you need to. So we have multiple pages. Pages can have pages within them, and you can have all sorts of rich text editing. And if you use the slash, type in a slash, you get a whole bunch of extra options, including adding things like tables, We recently added the ability to add a whole list, which basically allows you to show tasks in a document. So if you've used Notion before, quite similar to that. Cool. It also allows everyone to be looking at the same thing and learning the same thing. So particularly with processes, you can kind of have everyone be looking at the same standardized process and then bring up any points where they had perhaps thought of doing it differently or were going to do it differently. Particularly when you're all, in different places and not talking, kind of constantly as you would be in an office, it'd be really great to have that place to evoke any differences and make sure everyone's on the same page. Documenting it also allows you to make sure it's fully thought through and really easy to communicate, because communicating is going to be, as we said, very intentional now. We can mark these up. So for example, let me jump to a page that has some text on it. If you highlight something, you can make a comment. You can assign that to a single person or just anyone. So anyone who has access, and they'll be able to access that and then reply to that comment, or mark it off if it's done. So really great for proofing or maybe discussion about different processes, how they can be improved, etc. You can kind of have whole conversations on and about the document. Also really useful for project plans and just sharing things. You can, of course, publicly share these. So you have this share page button up here. You can either copy the private link to share it within your team or turn on the public link to share it with people outside of your ClickUp account. Okay, and then templates. Templates are good to talk about. So you can template just about anything. So a template for a list might just be all the tasks in that list. So you can have a kind of a set process, and that when a new client comes in, you can just use that template and you've got all the tasks required to do the steps for that client. We've also got checklist templates. So for example, I could add a checklist here and then select my template, and it's going to have all those steps in there. So if you do have a lower level process, and by that I mean each step doesn't have sub-steps, then you can just drop in a checklist template and then tick it off as you go. Really great for remembering things, ensuring things are done, and allows anyone else who comes to this task to kind of instantly look and see what's done and what's not done. Yeah, particularly when no one else is around to notice. If you do feel like as I said earlier, I definitely am someone who forgets things unless they're written down. So this can be a really great way of guaranteeing that you remember all the steps when no one else is around to catch you. I also suggest to allow for being out of sync. When people are in the same office, you tend to work on the same things at the same time, just so you can kind of talk about it. When you're working separately, people will often order their days differently. So one person might be working on task A in the morning, one person working on task B, and then doing task A in the afternoon. So even though you're kind of in the same time zone, you might still work on things in different orders. And that's okay. So what I would suggest is maintaining the task and your notes in such a way that people can see where you got up to, what you're done, what's done, and then kind of where they fit in to start off once they get involved. So again, commenting really great. Also, task descriptions can be used to kind of give a summary or overview of the task and where it's at as well. Task descriptions do have a history, but it'll only kind of show one state at a time, whereas comments will have this time-stamped progress over time kind of conversation style. Awesome. And then the last one I wanted to cover is managing progress and outcomes. So managing from afar means you have less visibility. There are some good practices that can help, like a weekly goal meeting I mentioned earlier, or a daily stand-up chat view. So one thing that could be really neat is to have a single view where everyone puts in their what they're working on for the day, what is kind of blocking them, and what they might need help with. And that way it just kind of keeps everyone up to date. I think I had that somewhere. Let me just see if I can find it. Here we go. So today I'm working on, here are the blockers that might be stopping me that I'm working through, and here's where help is needed. And if everyone posts on that in the morning, then you can simply read through, see what everyone's doing, keeps everyone kind of understanding the current state of work and where they could possibly help someone out to make things go faster. It's also really good to just be able to quickly see where things are at and how work is progressing. And in ClickUp, we do this mainly with dashboards. So let's have a look at our status check dashboard here. So it's got a couple of key widgets, and widgets are these kind of blocks that you can move them around, and they each show a different type of data. So the top one here is portfolio, and portfolio allows you to add a number of lists or folders, and then it has information about them. In particular, it has the progress of them, the statuses that are in those lists or folders, to give you kind of a heat map of where things are up to, how many tasks are completed, overdue, and if the list has an end date, you can show that. Then you have time information for time estimated, time remaining, and some other fields in here that are kind of related to the ones I just mentioned. So that's the quickest way to get a really fast overview of where things are at. All you have to do when you're creating a portfolio widget is to add the lists and folders. That's it. Okay, next up, I've got some counters. So these are calculation widgets. And in here, you can choose to select data from a certain place, how to count it, and if you want to add a unit, you can. For example, here, I could add tasks as the unit and put it on the right. So what I've got here is I've got the number of tasks completed this week, this month, last week, and last month. I've also got the total number of outstanding improvement tasks. So that's counting tasks in a certain list. It looks like we're doing a good job. There's none there, as well as sales this month. And so that's actually counting, instead of tasks, it's counting a custom field. So here we go. We've got a field called deal size. It's actually a money field, and it's summing that up. So that can be really great to build customized summaries. If it's kind of not something that exists within the portfolio widget, you can just build it yourself based on where you select information from, what filters you select, and how you choose to count it. So for example, task completed last week has a filter, the date close must be in the last 7 days. So there's a fair few things you can do with filters to really make those widgets specific. Next up, we've got workload by person. So each person here is a column in a bar chart, and then the height of the chart relates to the number of tasks they have, and that's colored by what status they're in. So we can see the people with the most orange are have the most work to do. So that looks like myself and Shane. In terms of setup, I'll let you kind of have a look at this once you get to it, but basically it's fairly simple. You select the location, the x-axis, the y-axis, how to group them, which is the coloring. Next up, we have a task list, and this is literally the same as list view. It's just a list of tasks with the columns beside them. Key thing here is you can put a filter on it to just see the really high priority tasks, whatever that means for you, and then allows you to see it kind of in context of all your other reporting. So you could even have multiple task lists side by side and see two different things. Then we've got some widgets for time estimated and time tracked. If you are doing time tracking in your company, here we can see the total time and time estimated is across all time. So we can see what's been done by each person, and we have columns for time estimate, time tracked, and remaining. Overall, time tracked can have a time range added. So here we're only seeing last week. So I just want to see last week and who was working on what and how much time did they spend on it. So that can be really helpful. We've also got some reports for worked on and completed. So again, the system just kind of records what tasks were updated by which person. And so this is any tasks that I've updated and any tasks that Shane's updated, just to see what kind of things were across is basically the point there. And then completed. So these are things that were moved into a done or complete status last week. Then we have workspace points. And this is all about adoption. So who's using ClickUp? So it counts who is clearing notifications, adding comments, resolving comments, completing tasks, and working on tasks. And it just kind of does a point system to add those all up. So it can just be a fun way of encouraging adoption and getting used to using ClickUp. And then I've got a little pie chart in the bottom here just to show of all of the open tasks. We're only showing the open ones in an active status. Of all of them, how they divided between people, just so we can see kind of as of today, how are things distributed? Cool. Another thing to be aware of if you are managing is to see people's profiles. So for yourself, you've got an inbox which has all the tasks assigned to you, due today and later, etc. You can also click on someone else's name here and go to their profile. And this shows their inbox. So I've got the things that are started or overdue, things that are not started yet but coming up in the future, things that are done, and then you can have a look at a few recents and unscheduled as well. And then lastly, people often use just the regular list view or even board view to kind of see reports as well. One particularly useful way of doing that is clicking on the Everyone button. So me mode will show only your own tasks. Everyone will show you other people's tasks. And so you can quickly see, okay, what's Shane working on in this list? If you do, sorting, filtering, grouping, you can actually come up with different ways of visualizing tasks to help you quickly see and understand information about that person or about that list to get reports there. And you can, of course, save this. You can even save it as a new view so you can jump back to it quickly. And just in case you haven't seen it before, any view, you can have these 3 dots on the side here, and you can add that to favorites. And that way you can quickly jump back to it at any point in time. I like to pin my favorites across the top, but that's up to you whether you prefer that or not. Okay, right, so last thing I'm going to go over now is just a bit of a suggested workflow, and then we're going to open up for questions. So what works for me, and so I'm going to suggest it. Obviously, you don't have to do this, and it's not necessarily the best way to use ClickUp. There's a million ways to use ClickUp, and they're all pretty great. But what I would suggest if you're new to remote work is to choose how to identify tasks that are relevant to you. For me, I'm just going to assign them to myself. Go back to this view. Okay, so I've got tasks assigned to myself. If you don't know, there's a quick link, quick hotkey here. If you hover over it and press M, it'll assign it to you or unassign it to you. So I'm using assignment as a way to see what's relevant to me, and then create a view where you can see all of these together. So I'm going to create a view at the, here I'm going to do it at the space level because this is where I've got all my tasks within. I've called it My Tasks, and I've just turned on Me mode. So instead of seeing all tasks, I'm seeing only tasks that are assigned to me, and I've saved that. Then prioritize them. And you can do this in a bunch of different ways. I think I'm just going to use the priority column. So you can see here I've added some priorities. These ones are unprioritized. I'm going to say this is normal, and this one is high priority, or urgent actually. Cool. And then I prefer to choose the top ones that I'm going to do today and create a way of seeing just them. Now I could filter on priority or something, but I'm actually just going to use a manual task mention list. So perhaps today I need to get onto this one, and also contacting Uber and Mercedes. So I'm going to go into, I might make a private doc. So here I can make this a personal view, which means no one else will see it. It's not going to clutter up their views. I'm going to do it at the top level. That makes sense to me in terms of this doc relates to everything in this space. Okay, and then I'm going to say, I want to call this focus list. And then so today I was going to do the question. So I'll go at, and then browse for, I've forgotten where that is. It's going to be in customer service questions, this one. And then second one was Uber. By the way, these tasks don't relate to anything. These are just household names that I've entered as potential accounts. And I've got my list there. And I might go a bit longer than this. I tend to, depending on the size of tasks, I'll go between 3 to 6 tasks. I personally try and avoid having more than that. It starts to feel like a lot, even if they're small tasks. So I'll kind of get that 6 done, and then if they've got time left, I'll make another list of 6 to keep going on with. Now, once I've got this, I'll post my stand-up for my team so that my team can see what I'm working on. And then any issues I've got with things I need to do or help I need. So I'd say, today I'm working on these blockers, etc. Cool. Then I'd go through and read my team stand-up, so I make sure I understand where they're all at, and whether or not there's anything I can do to help them out, or any ways that I know of getting around their blockers. And then I'd start working on my tasks. So I'd go to my doc, open my first one, and get to work. Now, if I'm a manager, I might add one extra step in there of checking my dashboard to make sure everything's on track, and then either follow up on issues immediately or create tasks to investigate those issues. So that's kind of my workflow, what works for me. Feel free to adjust that as needed so that you can see what you need to do to stay focused throughout the day. Okay, now before we open up for questions, I just want to mention that you can always contact support through this question icon here and the chat feature. We're available pretty much 24/7, and we try and get back as quickly as we can. Awesome. That said, on to questions. So Sophia has passed one through to me here that would be good to answer live. And please do make sure that you're sending questions through via the question A section. Yeah, cool. Okay, so the question here is, have you had experience creating a lessons learned database or issues log in ClickUp? Something like a spreadsheet as opposed to working on a doc would be preferred. I don't know what lessons learned is, but issues log, yes, definitely. So I guess what you do there is just create a list. And basically, I guess you just issues log. Each task would then be an issue. And depending on what functionality you need with that, I need to turn off me mode here. You could have a whole bunch of custom fields to quickly categorize and give other information to those issues. You could have work on any works to be done on resolving those issues in the comments. You might even have a form view so that people outside of ClickUp can submit issues. Yeah, it works very, very well for that. There's lots of things that can be done there. Lessons learned, I'm kind of guessing that might be things like things that you've learned and want to keep track of all the things that you've learned. It would work very similar. You could just create a list. Okie dokie. I'm just going to jump into some other questions here. All right, so Sally asks, if you have, say, 3 lists within a folder, but those lists have different fields in them, is there a way of viewing them all with their different fields at the folder view? Right, okay. So yes, it's possible to, yes, it's possible to pull those tasks together, but the question is, can I see different custom fields all together at a folder level when those fields don't exist on each of the lists? And the answer is no, sorry. The data does need to be kind of in the same way. So typically what I do, if I need something across multiple, I need to see something at the folder level, I can add that field at the folder level. So if it already exists at a list level, I just go into existing fields and then add whichever the field is. What that means is it would exist on the other lists, and it sounds like that's not perfect for you, that you'd rather have it only exist on one list. Unfortunately, there's no way around that. You can, of course, hide the column on the other lists, so it's not too in the way. But if you do want to see custom fields at any hierarchy level, they do need to exist on that whole level. Okay, next up, Keely says, thanks, new to ClickUp. Can you put in estimated time for the projects and estimated hours to work on? How do you break up the hours as well? If your task takes 3 hours and you want to break up the task into 3 different task sessions to complete, how do you handle that? Okay, good question. So first part is, how do you put in estimated hours? I think you probably have seen that on a task level, but the question was also how to do that on the project level. So task level is here. Project level currently just rolls up all tasks. So if I were to go add a calculation to the column, I can see the total time estimate for this whole list. And if your project is set up a different way, you can go to the folder or a higher level filter for however you're organizing your project and still get the total there. In terms of adding a single figure to the list and then using it up on tasks, we don't have a functionality for that. You can, of course, record project details in perhaps like a description, like, this is the client, this is the hours scoped, and have the information there, but it won't pull through to this actual data. We do a task first and then roll up type system. How do you break down into different sessions? So this is something that's a really interesting case around time blocking that we've thought about and how we could possibly do. The best way to do it currently is just to create subtasks. So let's say session 1, session 2, and then you can give each of these a different time estimate. So this one, I might say, I'm going to do 2 hours here, and I can give it, start and due dates if I want to block out exactly when I'm going to do it. Now, the key thing here is this time estimate has gone up to 10 hours. We probably don't want that. So what I would do, instead of having both time on the parent task and the subtasks, I would delete it on the parent task. And so then we can just have these subtasks that add up to the total, and that will roll up to the parent. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because I have a ClickUp on called time estimate rollup. And so it will roll up subtasks to the parent task. If I did want to have them separate, I could turn this off so that my subtasks, I could have 8 hours on the parent task and then 2/6 on the subtask, and they would not roll up. Just be aware that if you turn that off, it applies for your whole workspace. Cool. All right. And apologies in advance if I get anyone's name wrong. I think this is Sasa, says, can I set somewhere to always expand subtasks so I don't have to manually do it for every list? I have 3 workspaces and several spaces in each. Okay, so sounds like you already know that you can expand subtasks here, but you don't have to click on this for each list. Yes, there's a way of doing that. What I would suggest is I'd start off with a fresh list. So let's go new list here. I'm just going to call it list. And then I would set that setting and then just save this list. First of all, just save it and then save it as a template. Cool. And okay, I'll say this, call this new default. Then what we can do is at the space level, we can go into the space settings and set a default template. So default settings for views, default template views, list view. What have I done wrong here? Sorry, I'm just going to double check my work there. Save as template, new default. I've not run into this issue before. I'm now wondering if it needs to have at least one task.
So Justin, if you jump into the view options menu for the list, you'll see it there.
Right, so you can load a template here, is that what you mean?
Mm-hmm. So you'll just save that as a template and then you can set it as the default view template for the space.
Yes, thank you.
It's a tricky one.
I've saved the list as a template, not the view. Very good point. Thank you, Sophia. So instead of doing what I just did, which was completely unrelated, and saving the list, instead save this view of the list. So in templates here, save as template, and this one we'll call new default. Cool. So now we've got I'll say all members, now we've got a template of the view. So we can use that view to apply as the default view in here. Cool, so we've got new default. Now any new view and also the existing required view will have that template. Now you do have to do this once per space, which is still a little bit frustrating in that If you have a lot of spaces, you might have to do this several times. You only have to create a template once, but you might have to apply it to each space. But then anytime you create a new list, it will have those settings. So you don't have to do it each time. It'll just be there. Okay, Suzanne says, thanks, Justin, for this helpful info. Could you please go over dependencies? The terminology can be confusing. What is blocking what, or what is being blocked? What is the ClickUp process to go through to make sure that dependencies are entered correctly? Okay, sure thing. So let me jump into this leadership space. Cool. So dependencies, let me just check that I have them on. Yes. So dependencies you can find up here. They're also very easy to create on the Gantt chart view. On the Gantt chart, they are visualized. So if we put a few tasks out here, tasks do need start and due dates in order to appear on the Gantt chart. So I'm just going to schedule some. Oops. Cool. And you've got these little pins at the top and bottom, and you can simply link them together. And so any dependencies between tasks that are visible will be shown on the Gantt chart. So that can be a helpful way to set them up really quickly and adjust them. However, you can do it on list view as well. So you'll see here, we've now got these red and yellow icons for dependencies. So if we wanted to create a new one, we could go in here, go dependency, add a new waiting on or blocking dependency. Links are just arbitrary. They just say that they're related to each other. But the main two is this waiting on and blocking. So waiting on means that some other task needs to be completed before this task. This task is waiting on that one. Whereas if this is the first task and something else is waiting on it, then it's blocking that second task. So yeah, hopefully that's the kind of wording. So blocking is red, waiting on is yellow. So once I complete this, so these two are waiting on something else, this one is blocking something else. So as soon as I complete this blocking one of these, whichever one it was, will become unblocked. So we say we have a green thing here saying this one has a closed dependency. It was being blocked, it's no longer, but it is still blocking the third one. So I'm hoping that answers the question. COVID dependencies, terminology. What is the ClickUp process to go through to make sure dependencies are entered correctly? I would probably just look at it from a Gantt view. You know, correct is going to be whatever is right for you. So as long as you can see it, can visualize it, and it makes sense to you, that's probably what correct is going to be. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that answers your question. Let me know if there's a follow-up there. Okay, Nick says, I have annual projects to go through, the same process each year. How would I go about creating a space template so I can just recreate the same project each year? Yep, definitely. So at the space level, these three dots, and then would go to save as template. And you can give it a name, hit save, choose what you want to have saved. And then each year you could just go add space from a template and select the template you've saved. Cool. And then again from Nick, is there a way to export Gantt chart to PDF? Not yet, but it is something that's been highly requested. We know about it and we are working on it. Okay, so I might just answer a couple more questions and then we'll have to wrap up. Nick says, thank you so much. You're very welcome. So I had, Sasa says, I have a list that is grouped by statuses. I don't see a logical connection how they are grouped since it's not alphabetically. I have a list grouped by statuses. Yes, okay, so your statuses order is set up by you when you create the statuses. So in somewhere, if we go edit list statuses, this one's currently using space statuses. So actually let's go into the space. In the space, it's under space settings and we've got statuses. So the order that you have them in here is the order they'll appear in on the list. So this will always have to do before complete. So if we go into the list here, and we've got ones for each, actually let's go to a single list, it's easier to see. So we'll have to do first, and then if we show closed, we'll have complete. So they actually reverse them, which is sometimes a little bit confusing. They have the ones that are most finished at the top. So it's kind of like the reverse order of what you set up. But in terms of sequencing, it's the same. And if you do want to switch the order, you can go to Group By, Status, and just click on this little icon, and it'll change the order. But if you have like 3 or 4 or more, I'm just wondering where I might have that, perhaps in here. So if we go into Edit List Statuses, it'll always be in the order of unpaid, ready to pay, and paid, whichever order it is. Ready to pay will always be in the middle. Hopefully that makes sense. Is there a way to regroup them? It doesn't make sense to show the completed ones in the top. Yeah, so you can just change the order up there. Cool. Okay, maybe 2 more questions. Alberto says, thank you, you're very welcome. You're very welcome, Sasa. And actually last one from Suzanne. So closed dependency means that it's no longer being blocked. Have you considered no longer being blocked? Not personally, but yeah, I can see what you mean by making that clear. I'll take a note of that actually. Cool, and that is all of our questions answered. So thank you so much for coming to this webinar and asking questions. It's really great to have people here to help guide what we should talk about, and I hope that was really, really helpful. If you are new to remote work, welcome. It's pretty great. It does take some adjustment, but it's a good way to work. I've been doing it for a little while, so awesome. If you do have any future questions, do make sure to just ask us on our help link here, and have a great day. We'll see you next time.